All right, this is Tony Sweet and Captain Ron for Truth Be Told. We have another great show for you guys today. And we have with us all the way from another country. No, it's not Kansas or Ohio, but we have a beautiful, wonderful lady from Australia, and her name is Mary Rodwell, who is a professional counselor, hypnotherapist, ufologist, and researcher. She is the founder and principal of CERN, which is the Australian Close Encounter Resource Network, as well as the co-founder of Free. And she is recognized internationally and as one of Australia's leading researchers in UFO and contact phenomena. So please welcome to Truth Be Told, Mary Rodwell. There she is.
Hi, Mary.
Hi, Mary.
Hello, and thank you for not giving the whole lot, because it actually gets very boring.
There is a lot. Tony, this is one of those shows we need about 4 or 5 hours just to start scratching the surface.
Right, yes. And I think our audience will probably say this is going to be a part one, maybe. But she's also going to be at Contact in the Desert coming up this coming May 31st through June 3rd. We're all going to be there. We hope you guys get your tickets and go visit us there, and plus see Mary do her work. And Mary, we're going to talk about your contact work here in a little bit, but I think we should just dive right into this before the time gets away from us. But one of the great starting point here is you work with Free, and the huge study of contactees you guys did shows that 75 to 80% of contactees thinks it was a good experience, where most of us always see in the movies and hear about these horrific experiences. So tell us about, that's a big number of people saying that this was a great experience or a good experience.
Well, I think the surveys that we've done, and as you know, they've been done very carefully with all the academic protocols needed for this to go into mainstream and gain credibility. And what we discovered with 4,200 people across the globe with 600 questions in detail, many questions asked in several ways so that it couldn't be misconstrued, that ultimately, even though some of them may be fearful to start with, through that process of coming to terms with their experiences, they literally change their mind about the experience and how it's changed them. And we noticed a kind of transformation in their understanding, in their perspective, what mattered to them. They would change, become more ecologically aware, more connected to living things. It was a whole shift in consciousness that we discovered. And that, to me, is far more evidence this is real than a piece of the craft or photographs, which has always been the way nuts and bolts ufologists have given this credibility. And I'm not knocking that, but I'm saying that this is the real evidence that something very real is happening to someone, because it doesn't happen through hallucinations and fantasies, and it doesn't happen in the patterns that we're seeing consistently over hundreds of thousands of people. And it also echoed my own research, although I didn't have the academic statistics in the way it's been done so well with Free. That's why I wrote the book Awakening, How It Transforms Your Life, because I was finding that out 15 years ago with my research, that people changed, most of them at least, in an extremely positive way.
You've looked at all these thousands of cases yourself, and it's obviously a worldwide phenomenon. And particularly with regards to these star children, it seems that these kids exhibit this maturity and wisdom way beyond their years. To me, it feels even more credible that you have a little 4-year-old saying, something about he felt an energy field, or something the 4-year-old wouldn't say. What do you think about these kids? That seems to be more compelling than the adult stories.
Sorry, I've lost the audio, guys.
Uh-oh.
Oh, it's back.
There we go. I was asking you about the children. It seems that seems more compelling than the adult abduction stories where these kids seem more credible. They're saying these things you wouldn't hear a 4-year-old say.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Okay. That was why I wrote The New Human, because with families, I realized once you understand that this is an intergenerational experience in most cases, that you can actually discern from either one parent or both grandparents when you ask them, and they'll say, oh, granddad was always interested in UFOs, or grandma was always interested in something a little bit weird and wonderful. You can actually trace the genetic lines of this phenomena. And what was also fascinating is each generation appeared to be that little bit more conscious, that little bit more aware. But it intrigued me that with the children coming in, metaphysicians were calling them indigos, crystals, golden children, children of light, all these names. But for me, what that was being translated into with mainstream psychology was dysfunctions, ADHD, Asperger's, dyslexia, some forms of autism. But what was for me also compelling is if these children, our generations, were being upgraded by these intelligences, so why would we have these dysfunctional children? Unless they're not dysfunctional, it's that we don't understand what is actually going on with these children. And that is because I believe they're wired differently, deliberately. And I think part of that is so they can't get programmed into our inaccurate reality, which is the 3D reality that tells you that unless you can touch it, feel it, see it, smell it and hear it, it isn't real. And that has been the whole problem I've had and people with experiences have had, because they are experiencing a multidimensional reality. They are seeing things, seeing spirits, seeing orbs. They may sense energy fields. They may find themselves getting telepathic information, or they may, in fact, feel that like that not only are they telepathic, but they get information about the future or downloads of information. This is part of human reality. This is not just you can touch and feel it. And this is why I think nuts and bolts ufology's had a problem, because it's not looked at that, because it's not been so easily scientifically quantifiable, and they've tried to be so credible they've actually shut out most of the important information which is coming from the experiencer.
Well, it seems like you are touching on something, though, that some of this DNA research perhaps shows that we're being upgraded. Aren't you noticing something in there?
Absolutely. And, what you may understand is I come from a very scientific base. I was a nurse and I was a midwife. So I've got a very healthy left brain where I look and say, well, where is the tangibility here? We need tangibility because we're living in this reality. And the reality is that there's enough information from whistleblowers now, molecular biologists. And one of the most famed was Dr. Francis Crick, who himself believed that we were intelligently designed. And he said, it's just impossible to believe we came about by an accident. But not only that, these molecular biologists, whistleblowers, have noticed that there are certain things in our DNA that look like that it's been spliced and put back together again.
See, now that's interesting.
But apart from that, and I go into this in The New Human because it's so important to know about the cosmic agenda, as I call it, from these intelligences, is that we have 223 genes in our DNA that is a sideways insertion of genetic material that is all to do with higher psychological functioning. Now, they can't explain this. And I ended up talking to a retired scientist in Adelaide, and I mentioned this, and he came up to me afterwards and said, Mary, I worked with Dr. Crick, and I can tell you there is no other species on this planet that has those 223 genes. So where did they come from? And how is it that we went from Neanderthal, Cro-Magnon, then there's this missing link, and suddenly we developed twice the brain size and higher psychological functioning? I mean, there's the mystery, but it doesn't take a brain surgeon to work out what that may indicate.
But that
And to
also
me,
fits with the stories and the Sitchin work and all of that. It just fits right into the folklore.
and that's my point, is that that we're hearing that through mythology. The Dogon tribe in Northern Africa talked about these beings, these fish-like beings that altered the DNA. This was before any, these are people that don't, are still relatively primitive in terms of their way they live, but they had an innate understanding of their interaction with these beings. They called the Numo, and the Numo told them where they came from, and that they were doing genetic engineering. We have that mythology all the way through the indigenous tribes, where they talk about they came from the star beings, and that the star beings in Australia, the Wandjina, also the Mamu, which are the mantid beings, showing them how to live, giving them crystals for healing, showing them how to find water. And this is part of the Aboriginal dream time. So in every indigenous tribe, there is this mythology about the gods, which of course, in modern vernacular, we are looking at highly civilized, technological beings that came down and were perceived as gods, of course, because of the technology, etc., etc. I mean, but we've got to wake up and realize they weren't gods. They were just
Right.
a lot more technological than we are.
That's very compelling to me that all fits together, all of these things, the ancient monuments and the stories and now this genetics. It's all fitting in as another piece to that same story.
And I just saw this in the news. In fact, we're going to have a guy on hopefully next week to talk about this. An ancient human species was discovered in Philippines, I think, right? Cave. And I'm curious to see if they can come up with any type of DNA from that to see if there's, if it's
where that fits
into this mold. So I'm curious. Have you heard about that or discovered anything from that yet?
I look at all information to do with our ancient origins, and I'm, the skulls that we've seen, the elongated skulls,
right. In
which
Peru,
of course I believe were prevalent in Egypt, and they have found that some of the pharaohs there may very well have been one of the offspring of those particular species as well, because of the fact that they had these strange kinds of crowns or whatever. And the elongated skulls is very prevalent in Akhenaten as one of them, particularly where they found anomalies in Akhenaten. So it's coming out very slowly, but I have been particularly interested because I want to get a sense, as everybody asks, well, where is this going? What's the cosmic agenda, etc. And why are we being apparently upgraded, or at least our children are now becoming very different and a lot more multidimensionally aware?
Why do you feel? Because it seems like in the last 2,000 years especially, we haven't seemed to grow enough, like spiritually, until just recently. Because we still keep killing each other. We still keep destroying our planet. We seem to be going backwards in a lot of ways until recently, where it seems to be more accepting of like psychics and prophets. And why do you think just recently I could just be wrong, and this has just always been this way.
We're in that world, though.
Yeah, we're in that world, but it just seems like we're always not evolving where I think we should be if we're upgrading our DNA.
Tony, I think, and this is only a hypothesis.
Right.
I think when we reached a certain level of technology, and Crick touched on that when he said they have put in the information into our DNA, that when we reach a certain level of understanding, we will actually learn more about ourselves. And I think he meant two things. I think he meant when we reached a certain level of technology, we would realize we're a hybrid, because we would then see it for ourselves scientifically, but also that the information encoded in what they call the dormant DNA becomes activated. And I believe that's what's going on now. And there's a reason, I believe, behind that. Many of the experiencers say that these intelligences that are benevolent, I'm not saying all of them are because I don't know, but the ones that are benevolent are actually very concerned about the way that we're going with our technology. Let's face it, we now have technology, we have the capability of destroying the planet, for one thing, with the bombs that we have now. They're very concerned about that very fragility of us as a species when we're even having something that could do that, because they say it affects them. So I believe that they've seen us as like a 3-year-old with a loaded gun who doesn't realize it can kill people. They're saying we've got to upgrade this the humanity now, that upgrade their consciousness fast so that they can understand the consequences of what they're doing. And let's face it, we've got almost a polarity going on where you've got the 3D people that are still going around killing each other because they don't like the look of the skin, or the fact that they want their oil or gas. And on the other level, you've got people changing their lives dramatically. And that's happened very interestingly over the last few years. The older generations, many of them have had a kind of awakening. And some of that synchronously happened when I asked them, when did this shift happen for you? They'll say, oh, 2011, 2012-ish, something happened. And I started to see things differently. And it may not just be because they saw a UFO, and that can be major shift in consciousness for them. But it may be because they had a shamanic experience or a near-death experience, or they started to get interested in healing, and that shifted their awareness. So there's multiple ways that people may end up having contact with these beings. They might start doing remote viewing, and that shifts their consciousness. I think there is some kind of frequency that has been shifting consciousness, particularly in the last 15, 20 years since I've been involved, and it's exponential. As you said, a few years ago, if you said, oh, I see spirits, or, I'm a bit clairvoyant,
Right.
oh, yeah, now everybody says, oh, I went to a clairvoyant the other day, or I went to an astrologer, or whatever, what star sign are you? It's no biggie anymore. People are accepting, near-death experiences are being, there's countless books written about people having experiences like that. For example, countless books on shamanic experiences where they see beings, etc., etc. The paranormal is becoming far more normal, which is, I believe, part of this shift. And I believe some of that is whatever those frequencies that are hitting the planet, and we're getting them from the solar system, but we're getting them from the individuals that are incarnating now, and through downloads of information that's a frequency. People are doing strange writing, strange artwork, which shifts consciousness. The crop circles, all of these things are shifting consciousness, and people are starting to realize that what they dismissed as imagination or can't really trust that, realizing actually we are tapping in to the matrix through our right brain multidimensional cells, and it proves to be accurate. It proves to give us information that we can't access through our 3D left brain analytical side. And these downloads are anything from quantum physics to the origin of the species, to our origins, to connection to these beings. And the children are being born awake. And what I mean by that is they'll talk about their origins. They'll talk about the planetary system they've come from. They'll talk about their awareness. They'll talk about how they can communicate with animals, or even connect with plants and crystals. And they will talk about going with beings onto spacecraft, learning how to use their third eye, learning how to levitate, learning about how to work with the elements. So we're talking about expanded awareness. And the biggest problem for them is being born to a planet that tells them this does not exist.
Right. Don't they feel like they don't belong here, right? Don't they say to you, this doesn't feel right to me?
And I think you hear that more and more, people saying, I don't feel like I'm from here. Like I don't belong here. I hear it all the time.
It's a big one. If I had $1 for every time, I'd be a very rich woman.
Right.
But they'll also say, I feel like I've been adopted, because they don't feel quite the same as their siblings. Not only feeling very different, but saying to me, I want to go home because I don't like it here, because people are so barbaric. Look what they do to one another. And they get very, very upset. And you get these children of 4, 5, and 6 saying this.
Those are mature thoughts. Nobody would think that at 4 years old.
Right.
That's what's so compelling, Ron, is that you've got children coming up with really complex understanding, and their age is 5, 6, or 7. I had a 7-year-old tell me about the fact he can travel as far as the 9th dimension, that the little gray beings can only go as far as the 6th dimension, and that he can use the runes as a portal to go through to other planets as long as he knows their mathematical number.
How would he even know those words?
Yes, exactly. It's not, this isn't coming from cartoons.
Right.
They don't read books on this. They don't watch talk shows. So for me, again, you don't need to be a brain surgeon to work out that this is a reality for them. When a child tells you, one young man of 9 wanted to talk to me from the US, and he said to me, I said, why did you want to talk to me? He said, well, it's because of your frequency. And then told me he was from Orion, that he'd been a light physicist working on time travel technology, and he was really struggling on this planet because most of the scientists are pretty dumb, and that the nearest to his understanding was Nikola Tesla. Now, this is a 9-year-old telling me this.
I wish we could somehow test some of these kids or show something to convince other people that this is happening, because this is a credible thing, and it feels like it could be testable.
I think when the time is right, that will certainly be the case, where they can show some of what they're doing. At the moment, one of the big issues is that the parents are obviously concerned that if the kids are tested, or it will be used for nefarious reasons, and they'll be identified, because whether we like it or not, there are agencies on this planet that want these kids and have picked these kids up.
We have a question from our chat room, and it says, "Is this a natural progression or program for all primitive species on planets with life?"
Very good question. If I can relate what a young 8-year-old girl told me about being taken to a planet and being shown how to use her abilities, she was also shown genetic engineering. And they showed her how they were doing genetic engineering on different species, different plants, different animals, to seed other planets. So part of it is that finding the right combination of genetics for certain environments in different planets, not just here, but in other universes. So there's a lot of genetic engineering going on, and it seems like the mantid beings are particularly good at it. They also work with timelines from some of my research, but primarily they do a lot of the genetic engineering. And we are certainly an experiment. And the whole thing with why we have this DNA that as yet is not activated is because I believe that's the ET aspect of our DNA. And as we get activated, which seems to be going on, where people suddenly say, or they may just say, I'm a hybrid. I have a 16-year-old from Spain telling me that she had it encoded in her DNA that at 15, she would wake up and realize who she was, and that she was a hybrid. And she said, and she realized not only was she a hybrid, that her mother had been picked up and some extra ET DNA was added to give her certain abilities. So she's fully aware of that, and it's encoded in our DNA.
Are most of these children, because I've mentioned this several times on our show, that one of my nieces has Asperger's, autistic, and she does have an intuitiveness to her, meaning she sees spirits. She remembers being in my sister's stomach. Very detailed, very intelligent, and it kind of brings this to the attention of, like, where do these young kids come from? Get this from, because she taught herself how to speak Spanish by just watching Dora the Explorer, I think is what it is. And so it's fascinating to think about this. But Well, I wanted to, we're going to have to take a quick break because our good friend George Norrie, he's going to also be at Contact in the Desert. So
as will Mary Rodwell.
As Mary Rodwell will be there, and we want to make sure you go to contactinthedesert.com, get your tickets, look at all the schedule. But let's take a quick break. When we come back, we have more questions for our amazing Mary Rodwell. So don't go anywhere.
Join me, George Norrie, in Indian Wells, California, for the 7th Annual Contact in the Desert UFO Conference, May 31st to June 3rd. Contact in the Desert is an epic weekend of adventure filled with exciting explorations into ancient aliens, human origins, crop circles, UFO sightings, disclosure, and the newest evidence of ongoing contact. This amazing weekend offers over 50 lectures, 40 workshops, 8 exciting panels, special events, and a luncheon that I'm hosting. Contact in the Desert also features leading experts including Giorgio Tsoukalos, David Wilcock, Linda Moulton Howe, Michael Tellinger, Eric von Daniken, Doc Wallach, and many more important researchers and scientists in the field. Contact in the Desert is your place for inside information. Join us at thecontactinthedesert.com to get your tickets today. It's time to make contact. That's contactinthedesert.com. Don't miss it. Contactinthedesert.com.
We are back on Truth Be Told. I am Captain Ron with Tony Sweet. Today we have Mary Rodwell here, and I want to ask Mary, what I want personally is more concrete evidence. You've told some stories before about some of these cases you've studied where, like this one woman who drew pictures and then put them on a transparency, and then they ended up forming something. Can you talk about that and some of these other things that show us that there is some evidence here that something's going on?
Yes, you're talking about Tracy Taylor.
Correct.
And Tracy came to me very early on in my research, and she found herself, whenever she was distracted with black and white drawings to start with, they would be done in 10 minutes. The lines and angles would be totally accurate. She drew them all freehand, and she was told to put them on transparencies, and they would teach her more about what was going on. And interestingly, she brought them along with her to an experiencer group, and those within the group started to find ways of putting them all together. But they were all really talking about human evolution. She also had, she started to do color drawings, which seemed multidimensional. And again, as soon as she tried to have any input, the pen, her hand would stop. So it had to be totally clear for her to actually do this. And some of them really complex, within about 3 or 4 hours, she would have done it. One of the black and white ones, I think later on, I was able to show people. She'd gone to Luxor in Egypt, and she knew she needed to take this particular one because some of them related to the pyramids. And she got this one black and white drawing that she'd done, and it fitted identically over a hieroglyph.
Come on.
I mean, it blew me away.
Now, see, whatever that is, if that's a past life, if it's an alien thing, whatever it is, that's amazing.
It was identical.
Wow.
And she knew it was. But, you're quite right. Where is the evidence from what these are saying? The evidence to me is in numerous ways. First of all, how many kids start saying the same thing? And I'll give you an example that I've actually got in the New Human, where an 8-year-old had a particular symbol she saw on the craft. When she went to Mars, she was talking about the gray beings, the mantid beings. She was seeing domes on Mars, which of course the NASA spacecraft shows these domes if you look. But the mother, and she said, I don't know why I'm seeing this particular symbol, but I got a sense of it. She asked me if any other child had come up with that symbol. Synchronously, I knew another child, a year younger, a girl, the same as this one, who told her mum she'd been to Mars on a spacecraft. So I wrote to the father and I said, has your daughter ever seen this symbol? And he was really good. He didn't front load her. He didn't tell her anything other than, have you ever seen this particular symbol? Oh, yes, she says. when I've been on the spaceship to Mars.
See, that's something.
It means this, 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 and this, and this. And I've seen it a number of times. It means they know where you are. It means a few other things. Now, this was completely, straight, clear, no front loading. I then send this to the mother and for the other 8-year-old that had been or said she'd been to Mars, and gave her the explanation. And the 8-year-old said, yes, that's what I knew it meant, and that's how I understand it. Now, they had no communication. There was no front loading, but they'd both seen exactly the same symbol, and both had talked about going on spacecraft to Mars, being taught things in what I call the space school. And
love it.
What are the odds?
Right. That is really strong. It's also it's reminiscent to me of the ayahuasca experience, where people that take ayahuasca see the same exact beings when they go into this experience. It's very similar to that, what you're talking about. If I take that to somebody, they'll say, well, that's neat. Maybe it's a coincidence, maybe whatever. We need something stronger. Like you've talked about some people that claim to be able to speak, and I don't know if they can write alien languages. Couldn't we have somebody write something down and then have somebody else read it? An alien language? That would be compelling.
Well, let me tell you a little story.
Tell me a story.
I was accessed by a wonderful lady who was reading my book, Awakening, and in it I've got Tracy Taylor with a script. And she wrote to me and said, Mary, my daughter's really confounded me because she saw me reading your book and she looked at the script and said to her mother, I can read that. And her mother said, what do you mean you can read it? She said, well, I can read it. She said, do you want me to read it to you?
This is the alien written text that somebody claims is
in my book Awakening. And the mother, this little girl is 7, by the way.
Wow.
All right. So what happens was I said, can I speak to your daughter? And can she do that for me over Skype? So this lovely little confident 7-year-old, and I said, Mum tells me that you can read the script in my book. Oh, yes, she said. I said, could you do that for me? Oh, yes, she said, do you want it in the language or do you want it in English?
Oh, wow, man, that's great.
Now, I say, could you do both? And she said, oh, yes. So she comes out with the language and then she translates it. So I push my luck and I say to her, do you know the source of this? And she said, oh, yes, that's the Greys. Now, that's not the end of the story. I ended up seeing her on a one-to-one with a group a few months later, and I've got a book. I've got so many send me scripts. I've got hundreds of scripts. Some of them are very similar, like shorthand. Some of them are like Chinese writing. There's a whole range of them. Anyway, she was there with her mum and a group of people, and I said, could you read any of these? And she goes through the script. She says, some of these I can't read. She said, I gathered some are not translatable in the way we understand it. But she stopped at one that she'd never seen before. And this is in front of adults and me. She starts to read in a diagonal way. And you can see that she's translating it. She does it in the language. She then translates it. And I said to her, and what's the source of that one? And she said, oh, the Mantid and the Greys. This is in front of a group of adults.
Wow.
Now, you tell me any kid that can do that in that kind of a way and tell me that that's just a made up. Because to me, sorry.
No, to me, that's very compelling, too. I mean, that's really strong. I don't know how they can... We can't show that to the regular world, and they're not going to buy it. The 3D world, as you call it, which I love that you refer to regular people as the 3D world. What about some of these abilities that you say some of these people develop after having a contact the experience? I've heard of some of your clients saying that they can turn off a street light, for example.
Look, I've seen some of this go on. I've even got a little picture now, and you can look at it and you pull it apart if you like, of a woman that sent me a photograph of her daughter. and she's literally, you've got her 2 feet off the ground, about this high, literally like that. And she said her daughter was shown how to levitate. A lot of the kids are shown how to levitate. The interesting thing is that at the moment, how we scientifically qualify it is going to be in the right conditions where they're safe and where their identity is protected and all these things. And of course, understandably, the parents are concerned about that. The interesting thing is, though, that a lot of them are showing healing abilities, and the parents will say, you know, I hurt my knee really badly, and my daughter, all of 8 years old, came up and said, I can fix that. And within a few minutes, they have done. But it's all witness testimony. We've not had scientific way of proving yet what these kids can do, except for the overwhelming testimony of parents from all over the world writing to me and telling me what their children are talking about.
I'm compelled by that, but you can't go to the 3D world with that. Oh, all these people claim it. They're like, that's not enough. But why? If we have these kids, they're going to say to me, if you have these kids, why can't one of them go on Jimmy Kimmel tonight and levitate 2 feet off the ground, and they'll be believers right then. Boom.
Well, there is one thing I did show, and it's a way of training 6 to 12-year-olds to see without physical sight. And it's called, the second name is ICU. But what it is, it's a training being done now it was done in Mexico and it's done in India, where they train children, usually from 6 to 12 is a really good time. And they don't take many lessons. They are shown literally, but they're blindfolded, and then they are shown how to expand their consciousness, their inner sight, if you like, and then can start to read and perceive things beyond their sight. I've got video of it. I've got a video of a lady in Canada that came to Australia and taught it to a group actually where I live. And one of the little girls, the Australian girls, I've got the footage of it, where she's there with the blindfold on and she's coloring, detailed coloring. And then she reads various things they hold up. And these are special goggles that they cannot see out of. But she's been shown within a few hours how to do it, and she was doing it. Literally being at things in front. I've got the video footage of that. Which
they hold something in front of her and she draws it?
Oh, she was coloring with the goggles on.
So she
literally
can't see.
Detailed coloring. Then they held up cards and asked her to read them, and she could read them. And then they even held up some jewelry, and she described it. These children can be taught to do this literally within the space of a few lessons, and it's being done.
Why doesn't somebody go on America's Got Talent and do this or something, right? I mean,
this is literally going on. I first heard about it. They were training them in Mexico many years ago, and I saw a 17-year-old that was blindfolded, and she was reading the newspaper through her shoes, and they put this newspaper under her feet, and she was reading through her feet. And I didn't realize how that they can be taught this. They're doing it in India. They're teaching them in India. And it's now being done in England. And there was a film crew that filmed some of the children there and what they were doing. And also I've got footage of Karen Osborne, who is Canadian, and she's teaching it. It's called ICU Academy. But I saw it personally in my own backyard with some of the children, Australian children, and what they could do within a few hours. So that's one way of showing these kids are really able, very easily, with a little bit of training, to show you what they can do.
Of all the abductees or contactees, I hear we talk a lot about the Greys, but we always hear about so many different species of aliens. Is it majority of the Greys, or do you hear other aliens, species that have been abducting? And if it is, is there a difference in the testing that they do and the experience that they do?
It's a good question, and we're talking here about something that's very complex. For example, I was told by one lady here in Queensland that she knew of at least 165 species of grey.
Wow.
Different levels of consciousness, from the more robotic that have a job to do to the ones that are highly conscious, those with sense of humor and personality. etc., etc. So that's the first thing. Secondly, in our surveys with Free, we discovered the first level of extraterrestrials that are perceived by people is actually humanoids, not greys. They come down, they're the second that people see. That what's not known too is the extraordinary variety of non-human intelligences that people see, from lion beings to feline beings to blue beings to crystalline beings to, there's a plethora of different types of beings that are drawn, that I get sent to me saying, and they'll have a name for them. This is my, one of my special friends. This one's been with me all my life and helps me with this, that, and the other. So I hope to show a little bit more of the variety of intelligences that people see. The other thing that we need to understand is not all of them are solid, they're not all solid biological beings. There are some that are interdimensional, extra-dimensional, trans-dimensional, and what you will get is a hologram when they visit you, or there'll be an energy being or a light being of intelligence. So again, we've got all of this happening as part of it. And we also need to be aware that in the covert agencies, they have created program life forms that look like ETs. So when someone is picked up, for example, and they believe they're seeing a grey or a reptilian, it may actually be a program life form, because they're able to do that. And there are people that have seen these program life forms that are not ET. They've been programmed and they've been cloned, if you like.
These are the MyLab experiences people are having.
This is MyLab. So the complexity, so I get many that are having MyLab, but also having ET encounters. Well, you don't usually get picked up by MyLab unless you've had ET encounters, because the whole reason they pick you up is because you've had experiences on the craft and they want to find out what you know. What are the ETs teaching you? What do they understand? What are you doing on board craft?
Makes sense.
And why are they interested in you? That's the data the military want. They also may traumatize you, abuse you, to make sure that you don't talk about it.
As if you don't have enough problems in your life being abducted by real aliens. Now you got these a-holes coming after you.
Right.
They're the ones that are the most traumatized, because they're monitored and they're scared and intimidated.
Right.
And so they're scared to talk about the other stuff, because if they do, what's going to happen to them? They feel that they're monitored. They feel they may have implants that are monitoring. They also fear the mind intrusion, because some of them actually get that. We know that.
I feel for these people. I really do. That must be horribly traumatic.
And real quick before you ask your question, do you think, and when you say the light beings, do you think over the centuries and millenniums that light beings were considered also angels? Because if you go in the Bible, you hear about angels, presenting themselves. People, and people just flock to these areas. Do you think it could be actually alien?
All right. For me, it's just the lens that you want to perceive your reality and understand it by. Right. So if you're very religious or spiritual, in that sense, you may see what they perceive as an angel that could very well be a light being from someone who isn't so programmed into that spiritual matrix. I think what we have to, I'll tell you very briefly, there was a young Indian boy that contacted me, and he said to me, Mary, my problem is this. I know I'm a starseed, and I live in India. My relatives, my family, the Indians have hundreds of gods that they worship. And he says, but the problem is, Mary, how can I tell them they're just extraterrestrials? They're not real gods, but they worship them. And I can't tell them that. I can't own my truth and say, well, actually, these are all extraterrestrial beings. They are not gods. And this is where people are those that come from religious belief systems or certain very strong belief systems, to actually expand that into the fact it's all part of the same thing. It's just how you interpret it. So I'll even get those going to spiritualist groups and saying, Mary, my problem is that it's fine if I say I've got a spirit guide or I've got an angel or I see fairies, but heaven forbid I say I was seeing a blue being with black eyes, because that's just not cool.
Right.
That's just not spiritual.
Yeah.
Well, that's rubbish, because
it's so ridiculous how they think that's crazy, and it's just as crazy as the next thing. That stuff drives me crazy.
It's amazing, and part of the reason people struggle who come to see me that come from a belief system like that is because the community that they're part of is judging them for that, or it's demons.
The nuts and bolts alien stuff I always think is more concrete than the religious stuff, but we're not going to go there. The last question I have, then we're going to take a couple of these out of the chat room. People are bringing up some good stuff here. You were saying, is there a commonality that you see in the abduction experience where first you see a human-looking being, then you meet a gray, and then maybe one of these other life forms? Is that typical, or what do you see as a commonality-wise?
It's a hard one, because it really depends, it appears, on the level of acceptance and awareness of the individual. Some people never feel they've ever been abducted. They've always felt like they've been contacted, that they have had a spiritual relationship with their family. They call it the star family. There's never been anything scary. They felt very loved and very supported. And that's where they're going back. As one 8-year-old told me, the mantid beings, he told me, are his family. He comes from them, and he's going back to his ancestor mantid when he dies. So, he's not scared. In fact, he told me something very interesting, which will maybe shock some of your listeners, where he told me that sometimes when he goes on the spacecraft, he is aware that his consciousness, and he says it evaporates into the mantid form. So in other words, his essence, his consciousness, goes into a mantid form for a time, for whatever reason, and then comes back into his human form. So he's talking about his soul, spirit, consciousness, literally moving forms for a time that he feels perfectly, okay about, and it's a mantid. So we've got that, and then we've got those that say, oh, they're horrible, they take me at night, I have no understanding of why they're doing it, and feel very victimized. But what I've discovered is, for many of those, once they understand more of the connection they have with them, that actually changes. And that's what, we found with Free, that sometimes it can be very scary until they understand more of what's going on. And that will happen over a process where they also notice that they're changing, that their attitudes are changing, that they become very focused in getting the truth. They may find they suddenly are very, very interested in healing, or they change their diet, and they start to lose interest in materialism, and they connect it to the fact they're having these experiences.
And that's normal. Anything we do in life is scary at first, and then you've done it 10 times. It's like, oh, well, whatever. Right. Should we ask some questions from the group here?
Yeah, we have some great questions from the chat room. One is, what prophecies are the contactees currently talking about? I'm sure you're getting that every so often, at least.
It's a good one, and it's one I'm interested in terms of, we're having this awakening, as it appears to be, an activation of humanity. And I believe they're targeting human consciousness, not just individuals. I think this is a planetary activation, and some of us are going to respond to it. Some of us may not respond to it. But what I'm hearing is that there seems to be a point where we shift into a new kind of awareness, a new paradigm. And some are calling it an event. Some are calling it, a shift into what they would call a new earth. And some of the children talk about this, and some of the adults. What Dr. Lena Olson, who's a molecular biologist and also an experiencer, also someone who's one of the letter people, as she calls it, she was given the information, we're separating into two frequencies, the low frequency people and the high frequency people. And the 3D people are going to stay in 3D because that's what they choose to this lifetime. And the ones that are ready to go to another level of awareness are the high frequency people. And she sees that as what's actually happening right now. And if you think about it, it does seem to fit. We've got the polarity is becoming more and more obvious. Those that want to stay killing one another and generally trying to destroy everything. And you've got those that saying, I don't want anything of that now. Why are people doing this? I don't want to be part of it. So I think it's a combination of all that kind of information, but the event seems to be the big one. Major paradigm shift, whatever that ultimately means, I don't know.
See, I don't like that at all. I want to convince the 3D people of what's going on. I want some proof so we could take it over to the 3D people, and then they go, well, obviously it must be happening. That's what I want. Mary, you've been doing this a long time now. Have you seen the messages that we're getting from the alien experience? Are you seeing it evolve? Like, what do you think's coming next?
Well, that's a big one. I am seeing, certainly through my emails every single day now, the numbers of people that are having these experiences, and they're coming out with the scripts, they're coming out with the artwork, tuned into the music, or the downloads of new energy or free energy and what have you. That is the exciting bit, because what it's showing is not only evidence that this communication is going on and we're being prepared for something. In a way, let me put it like this. I feel some of the downloads that are in symbols, I've been told that symbol is like a compressed file of information that would fill a room with encyclopedias. Well, why are they doing that if we can't translate it? And my feeling is that it's the new software for the new hard drive when we get activated, so that when we get activated, we become really multidimensional. We're going to need new software to translate it. And I always go back to the film Lucy, where I don't know if you've seen the film Lucy. Yeah. What happens there is as she becomes more activated, she becomes more multidimensionally aware and has to translate that into a way of understanding it. Well, I think we're getting the downloads of that kind of software that's going to enable us, when whatever this shift is, to operate in a new multidimensional reality. And I don't know if I'm right, but my feeling is too that the reason, and I've talked to a number of the children and young teenagers about this hybrid feeling that they have. And one of the best ways it was described to me was a young man called Zach in my book. And he said, Mary, as our ET DNA gets activated, we then tap into more of our ancestry, our cosmic ancestry. And so suddenly you'll feel, if the Pleiadian part of your DNA is being activated, you'll say, I think I'm from the Pleiades. And somebody else, it might be the Arcturian bit of DNA that gets activated. I feel I'm a hybrid and I come from Arcturus. So he's saying, as that gets activated, we will become more aware of our cosmic heritage, and we will start to connect more and more to the family. And then I believe we're heading towards telepathy. I believe this is why the children.
I hope it comes soon. I want it to happen in our lifetime. I don't want all this stuff to happen later, and I missed it because we get just such little advances. Yeah. The needle just barely keeps moving.
It's kind of getting that lottery ticket, but missing it by one number.
That's it.
Well, we are almost out of time, and Mary, you are just a wealth of information and just lovely. I hope people really get encouraged to get their tickets, go see you at Contact in the Desert. You have workshops and some lectures you're going to be doing there. And could you just tell us in about 1-2 minutes of what exactly you're going to be talking about?
Well, I'm going to be talking about the new children, but I'm also going to be talking about the DNA and things about our DNA that help us understand what's going on and what is the cosmic agenda, and what are these children telling us about that agenda, and what is actually happening to us as a species as we evolve into that, if that is exactly what it is. And also I'll be looking at more of in depth of, is your child one of these? How do you support them? How can you help them be all that they can be? So there's going to be different aspects. And I'm also looking at the paranormal, how you can prove some more of what they're telling you. And I'm going to go into some of that as well, because there are ways of testing whether or not this is a reality or not. So I'm going to be doing a bit of all of that. Good. And just challenging the paradigm that most people are programmed into and saying, time to wake up, guys, because you're all able to do this.
Except for Tony Sweet. But I understand your point. I understand your point.
Well, thank you so much. You're amazing. Please consider you part of the UBN and Truth Be Told family. You are just fascinating. So
absolutely.
All right. Well, until next time, Truth Be Told, our wonderful fans and followers, please subscribe. Go visit Mary not only at Contact, but go to her website, thealienlady.com, and please, keep sharing this and get the message out so people can, keep enlightened as we move forward in this new realm.
Hear, hear.
All right. Take care of yourself. We'll see you next time on Truth Be Told. Bye-bye.
Take care.